Welcome to section 1 of The Lieutenant. Here's a plot summary map of the early events in the novel. Feel free to pause the video to read through the key events. Let's continue on. Let's have a look at Rooke's early education. It is these events that start shaping young Rooke. The first significant event is when Rooke is taken to the academy. This is the Portsmouth Naval Academy, and he's taken here because of his academic brilliance. Despite Rooke moving from one traditional schooling system, where his teachers thought of him as stupid, Rooke does not find a place of belonging at the academy. Rooke is academic, but he is not wealthy like the other boys at the academy. He lacks social skills to overcome this divide and make any genuine relationships, once again finding himself isolated. However, key event number 2, Rooke discovers the organ. Now, this is the musical instrument, the organ, not his internal organs. The significance of this is that Rooke uses the organ as a distraction and an escape from the cruel nature of the academy, particularly the bullies that pick on him. It's the first time we see passion and emotion from the normally calculating Rooke. This further highlights his appreciation of the fine arts, foreshadowing his choices later in the novel. Let's look at event 3. The teachers and students abuse Rooke. There are some key quotes there that show that Rooke does not have a great time at the Naval Academy, including having his objects hurled through the window, being hit painfully in the ear. We can see that Rooke really has a tough time. So Rooke endures the hardships of abuse. Rooke is consistently bullied, not only by his peers to whom he does not relate, but also at the hands of his teachers who have little faith in him. Rooke is hampered by this experience through much of his early life, as he leaves the academy without the social skills required. Let's look at some other events. Let's look at where Rooke joins the Marines. So initially, Rooke meets Dr. Vickery. Dr. Vickery was not troubled at all by the boys' awkwardness, and for the first time, Rooke feels he's in the right place. Now, this happens prior to the Marines. Rooke was academically challenged by Dr. Vickery, who studies astronomy, and he feels a sense of belonging with him for the first time. Vickery acts as a role model, and he encourages Rooke's love for astronomy. He overlooks the boy's social awkwardness and instead encourages his talent. However, we know that this isn't to last, and that there are not many roles out there for young astronomers. As such, Rooke joins the Marines. Let's look at the next key event. Once he has joined the Marines, Rooke learns social skills from another lieutenant named Silk. This is his first really defined friendship. But what's the significance? This event highlights the importance of Silk in progressing Rooke's social self. Rooke attempts to model Silk's behaviour because he's quite a popular character. It's the first time we see Rooke attempting to fit in with the social norms and to develop skills that were left wanting by his experience at the academy. While in the Marines, the next event happens, and it's Rooke's first sighting of Black people, and at this time he engages with a prostitute. During this event, Silk's confident character and Rooke's awkward nature are juxtaposed or compared in this scene. Rooke is prompted by Silk to engage with a coloured prostitute, where he is pushed out of his comfort zone and forced to question his morality. Rooke uses his understanding of astronomy to contextualize the experience. This event is significant, and it really comes full circle at the end of the novel. Let's look at the trauma that Rooke experiences. Now, while with the Marines, Rooke witnesses a lieutenant hung for mutiny. Now, this experience highlights that words and actions have an incredible amount of power. The military turns mutiny into a commercial type of event to be watched by all. Rooke has had an extreme emotional reaction to watching this event, which further highlights his empathy and his compassion. We can see there from the quotes that he had a really tough time watching this event. It is clear the violence of the Marines is not in keeping with Rooke's personality. However, he remains a part of the Marines as this is the only place that he's really found a sense of community. There's a little bit of a war going on, and as part of that, we see the next event, which is the death of Private Truby. This was Rooke's first experience of a naval battle. It highlights to Rooke and to the audience the realities and the brutalities of war. This was a traumatic experience for Rooke, one which is also viewed by Silk. They discuss it later, and it seems to bond them together. Now, the plot thickens. During this battle, Rooke is knocked unconscious, and he's returned home injured. Due to this, Rooke's perspective on life has changed. He's sent home with an injury, and he finds himself once again really lacking in purpose. That takes us to the end of section 1, regaining purpose. So after a substantial amount of time back home in England, wallowing in the sense of not having a purpose in life, Rooke decides to rejoin the Marines, just in a slightly different way. So Rooke now sees life differently after his experience on board the Resolution. He's seen the horrors of war firsthand, and this has altered him. He rejoins the Marines as a more hardened man. His capacity as an astronomer is what gets him the ticket to New South Wales. He also has the support of Dr. Vickery, who inspires him to take on the opportunity. From here, he's hoping to grow, learn and discover more about himself and about the world.